Good morning to you. It's 7 o'clock. You're watching the only breakfast show live from Westminster. Now, a boost for the vaccine rollout with Moderna jab starting in Wales today. But will it help counter the current slowdown in vaccinations? And what are the new questions around the AstraZeneca vaccine? We'll ask the Minister for Small Business, who's on the programme shortly. Plus, we're launching a new climate show today. Much more on that in just a moment. Now, this morning, my spider sense is tingling. At 9:30, we'll speak to the photographer using action figures to create marvellous movie scenes. We'll get some of his secrets of his craft. And milk before water? Really? New research reignites the debate over how to make that perfect cup of tea. We'll talk to a qualified tea champion at 9:45. It is Wednesday, the 7th of April. Climate crisis, how a quarter of people in Britain wouldn't change their habits to fight climate change. What wouldn't you give up? Vaccine booster, Moderna jab rollout to start in Wales, but new questions over the AstraZeneca vaccine after trials in children are paused.
From Sky News, we're trying to find Mr. McCuskey.
Calls for an inquiry. We tried to track down the Unite Union boss after £100 million of members' money was spent on building a hotel and conference centre. We report from the prison holding the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny amid reports of his health deteriorating. And snatching the crown, what happened when a contestant in a Sri Lankan beauty pageant didn't like the result?
And it's becoming less cold and less windy over the following few days, but there will still be some rain across northern areas. I'll have the full details for you later in the programme.
A very good morning to you. Lots of questions to answer in terms of our vaccine rollout this morning. The government minister will be joining us in just a moment. But first, almost a quarter of people in Britain are unwilling to change key habits that would help tackle climate change. That's according to an exclusive poll conducted for Sky News. It comes on the day Sky News is launching the first daily primetime news show dedicated to climate change. Here's our climate correspondent, Lisa Holland.
The changing landscape reflects efforts to halt the climate emergency. Drive around Britain and you can see it for yourself. But what about our individual habits? At the services, I met a trio of environmentalists heading to Wales in their hybrid car to go walrus spotting. They don't need any convincing the planet is in peril.
People's attitudes is like they can't be bothered.
An exclusive YouGov poll for Sky News showed nearly a quarter of people are not prepared to change a single key climate habit. This includes things like never driving a petrol or diesel car again or paying more to fly abroad. For now, none of us are actually allowed to holiday overseas, but heading into Wales to the Fontegary Leisure Park, Gareth and Merwyn Evans admit convenience, not climate concerns, guide their travel plans.
We're concerned about climate change, but its impact on us is negligible.
The YouGov poll found more than 2/3 of people don't feel personally impacted by climate change.
We might not realise that climate change affects us all or be prepared to make the changes needed. But the poll shows a growing realisation of some of the issues driving the climate emergency.
A high percentage of people understand the definition of climate issues such as carbon footprint and renewable energy, but much lower recognition of terms like the COP Climate Conference and its President and Climate Minister, Alok Sharma.
Do you know who this is?
No.
Alok Sharma?
David is worried the government could end sales of bikes like his.
That bike, is it diesel?
Petrol, but it goes like well, I wouldn't want an electric bike. They're too slow and they only last 5 hours.
With 2 young children who are going to be around and obviously see the effects climate change is have probably more than we will in my lifetime.
Friends of the Earth say the messaging on climate policies needs to change.
I think the emphasis does need to be on the benefits that are to be gained from tackling climate change. they're endless, really, when you start to think about it.
In this pivotal year for the climate, not everyone is yet on board on the UK's journey to net zero. Lisa Holland, Sky News, Barry.
Well, later today, Sky News is launching the first daily primetime news show devoted exclusively to the climate crisis, and it's hosted by Anna Jones.
Here on the Daily Climate Show, we're going to be covering the changes happening to our planet and meeting the people who are coming up with the solutions. And it's not just about recycling and planting trees, though. This is our data dashboard, and it helps us track in real time what's happening to the world right now. You can see, for example, the temperature going up as I speak, and also how much of our power right now is being generated by fossil fuels and by renewable sources. So you'll be able to watch us at 6:30 and 9:30 every weekday evening here on Sky News. And you can listen to our weekly Climate Cast podcast and watch our digital show from Friday as well.
And the Daily Climate Show launches tonight here on Sky News. As Anna said, you can watch it every weekday at 6:30 and 9:30. Now, our other main story this morning, the UK's fight against COVID-19 is getting a boost with a new jab, the Moderna vaccine, being rolled out in Wales. Now, it joins Pfizer and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccines to become the third to be approved in the UK. So far, the UK has ordered 17 million doses of the Moderna jab. It is a 2-dose vaccine, so that's enough to vaccinate 8.5 million people. The vaccine's minister told us that Moderna could be rolled out in England around the 3rd week of April. First batch arrived in Scotland on Monday. It's not been confirmed when the rollout is going to start in Northern Ireland. Now, the new jab comes as ministers and scientists work to dispel fears over the AstraZeneca vaccine after a trial on children was paused while the medicines regulator investigates a possible link to rare blood clots.
Analogy I've given is crossing a road. You look right, you look left, you look right again, there's no traffic, it's safe to cross the road. You can still trip, you can still stumble, these things happen. But was it safe to cross the road? Yes, it was. But nothing in life is risk-free.
Well, the Minister for Small Business, Consumer and Labour Markets, Paul Scully, joins us now. Good to see you this morning. Look, how concerned should we be over the AstraZeneca vaccine, particularly when it comes to, we think, people under 30?
I think the MHRA are doing their work. The AstraZeneca vaccine is safe. It's saved thousands of lives. It's gone out to millions of people, both here in the UK and across the world, and it's continuing to save lives. So my message would clearly be, if you get invited to have your vaccine, please do, because that's the way out of the pandemic. That's the way to get just continue saving lives, our community, but also restoring our economy and getting back to a semblance of normal life.
As you say, it has saved many, many lives. There's no doubt about that. But it's not about the people necessarily who've received it at this stage, is it? It's about, this concerns seem to be about the younger generation. I mean, you support, I presume, the fact that the trials in children, I think they're aged 6 to 18, have been stopped at this stage.
Well, it's right that the scientists do their work, that they make sure that the vaccine is as safe as possible, that they look at any possibility. There's no proof as yet that there's any causal links from the very, very rare occasions that there have been talks about blood clots. And so it's right that they do their work. But at the moment, everything is showing that the vaccine is safe, that it's best to get it, as you've heard from the scientists before. And this is why today we're also releasing the £20 million fund to extend our life sciences, because we've done an amazing job in rolling out the vaccine in good order with £300 million going in, but we're putting 20 million more into allowing our life sciences industry in this country to flourish.
Look, I mean, if it's necessary to pause a trial, and obviously we need to, particularly with children, we need to act very cautiously. Are we reaching a point where the regulator should be pausing AstraZeneca full stop until we know more, especially as we now have Moderna coming on stream?
No, you've got 3 vaccines coming on stream, and it's excellent that the Moderna vaccine is being rolled out in Wales, and it will be rolled out across the UK later on. But the MHRA and other scientists will be doing their work, looking to make sure they will only vaccinate people when they know that it is safe. That's what the regulator is there to do, and it's determined that it's safe for adults. They will continue their work on children in the weeks to come.
Well, forgive me, that's not the case, is it? I mean, obviously they aren't convinced it is completely safe. I mean, every drug that we take, even if it's just taking a paracetamol, there are certain risks linked to it. I mean, clearly there are concerns because of what's happened in other countries and now the stopping of this trial. I mean, no one can turn around and say this is 100% safe.
That's not what I'm saying. No, I mean, there are clearly, what I'm saying is that there's no causal links between blood clots and AstraZeneca that have been proven as yet. So that's why it's right that the scientists do their work. But clearly, as you've heard from Callum Semple just a short time ago, that it is the best thing to do in order to keep all of us well, all of us safe, is to have the vaccination when it's determined to do so. The regulators would not regulate a drug that is proven to be unsafe.
Where are we in terms of getting Moderna rolled out in England? I mean, obviously it's been launched in Wales today, which is very good news, of course, to get something else on stream. But when are we going to see it here in England?
You'll hear it in the next few days. It's the UK vaccination programme. The UK have spent £300 million on rolling this programme out. 3 out of 5 people within the UK have had their first vaccination so far. So it's going incredibly, at pace, as expected. And you'll see it coming to England and the other developed nations across the next few days.
The next few days, what, by the end of the week, perhaps?
Well, you've heard the vaccine minister, Nadine Zahawi, talking about the 3rd week of April. We're already just about to start the 2nd week of April, so that's not too long to wait, I think, to get that 3rd vaccine up and running, and then we can continue our excellent progress on the vaccination programme.
Well, are we still, in terms of the vaccination programme, are we still on target to hit all adults by the end of July? Because what are we looking at now? 2.7 million jabs a week, which is slightly lower than expected.
Yeah, we always knew that, at the beginning of going into April, that with the supply issues that we've had, that we just need to make sure that the supply was never going to be consistent right the way through the programme. But we've also been concentrating on second jabs as well to make sure, because people are coming up to their 12-week period since they had their first jab. So it's important that we keep that programme going as well. But as far as I can see, everything is pointing to being remaining on target.
Can I ask you about the whole passport issue? Because obviously that's causing quite a lot of concern, I mean, particularly on your own backbenches, not to say that the Labour Party not happy with things at the moment. What is your understanding as to who is going to be potentially affected by a domestic COVID passport? Is it likely to apply to some of the small businesses which you represent as Minister?
Well, look, the Prime Minister's been really clear that when
Well, he hasn't been. To be fair, he hasn't been. This is the problem.
What I'm saying is when we open the non-essential retail and hospitality next week, there will be no requirement for certification. There will be no requirement for certification come May the 17th when we get to stage 3 as well. What is being looked at is the entire gamut around the ethics and the practicalities of a certification program, and especially for sort of ticketed events, bigger events, and that's why it's linked to the Events Research Programme, which is doing its work through this month and is due to report back next month. So there's plenty of discussion, plenty of debate to look at before any decisions are taken.
Well, I mean, what is your understanding about the future then for small businesses? Are you saying that level of non-essential retail, you're not expecting them to ever have to deal with this passport issue?
Well, so the work that's being done at the moment is concentrating on ticketed big events and those kind of things, because they are tougher to get back to a semblance of normal rather than the high streets with non-essential retail and hospitality, including pubs. So that's where the work is being done at the moment. But as I say, there's a lot more work to be done, a lot more discussion and debate to be had on that over the coming weeks.
I mean, how much are we being led by other countries? The United States is obviously, that's ruled out federal passports. I mean, individual states could do their own thing on that. And yet, on the other hand, we're seeing a lot of the digital passport work being done in countries like Israel. I mean, how much are we looking at what is happening in other countries?
We're looking at other countries, definitely. I mean, I was just speaking to some of the hospitality sector yesterday, talking about Israel. They don't certify for going indoors, and clearly the weather is very different in Israel when you look at hospitality settings. So it's all of those kind of factors that we need to consider, as well as I say, the ethics, the practicalities, and those kind of things around it, which will be discussed over the next few weeks.
I mean, earlier on you mentioned this £20 million, which is going to be made available for people in life sciences in that industry to bid for extra funding. What difference is that actually going to make in securing us against future pandemics? I mean, on the surface, and particularly within the sort of monopoly money we've been talking about over the last 12 months, 20 million doesn't sound like a lot.
It builds on, it's wider than just simply pandemics. We have a world-beating life sciences cluster. In my own constituency in Sutton and Cheam, I've got the Institute of Cancer Research with the Royal Marsden using some of the cancer drugs that they produce there. They use a system called an MR Liner, which is an MRI scanner plus an X-ray scanner put together that's made in Crawley. But there's 70% of our life sciences sector is actually outside London and the South East. So what it does, it helps build our health resilience, it helps build our economy, that building back better in the industries of the future across the regions, across the UK as well.
Look, Minister, we're out of time, but good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Joe Pike. I mean, the Minister there sticking to the line about AstraZeneca, that it is safe to use, despite the fact that these concerns are being raised.
Yeah, and the government are in a very difficult position, Stephen. It didn't necessarily make complete sense that he said everything has shown the vaccine is safe, and you said, can you guarantee it's 100% safe? That's not what I'm saying, he replied, but saying there's no proof of causal links to blood clots. The problem really is this is about balances of risks, and we know that for most people, especially if you're older, the risk of getting COVID is far bigger than the potential risk of blood clots. It's different, in different sort of calculation, a different balance of risks when you're talking about younger people. But the fact there are restrictions in countries like Germany and Canada is significant. The fact that this Oxford child trial is being paused is also significant. But let's also look at the most recent numbers from the MHRA. They're saying that up to the 21st of March, there have been 18 cases of these blood clots after 30 million doses. So it does seem pretty insignificant risk, but certainly something that they clearly need to look at. On Moderna rolling out in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland in the next few days, the Minister said. And finally, on vaccine passports, another issue the government are in a difficult position over, not really wanting to clarify. He said the PM has been clear, you pointing out that he really hasn't at all. But focusing on ticketed events, like sports events and perhaps theatre events too, that is significant because we know Labour, who are sceptical of this, are likely to support vaccine passports for those bigger ticketed events.
OK. Joe, thank you. Well, still to come on the programme this morning, cutting out the pills. At 7:45, I'm going to be talking to a senior nurse to talk about new guidelines from the Medicines Watchdog advising against the use of painkillers for some people who have chronic pain. Hikers have been evacuated from a volcano in Iceland after it began erupting again. At 8:50, I'll talk to a geophysicist in Reykjavik about how concerned they now are. And at 8:50, I'll be talking to Chris Packham, who's calling on us all to think more about the welfare of the chickens that we eat. Now, the police officer who trained Derek Chauvin, who's standing trial for the murder of George Floyd, has told the court kneeling on a suspect's neck while handcuffed was contrary to his training. Lieutenant Johnny Mersall, a use of force instructor, said Mr Chauvin's actions went against what he'd been taught. He's the latest officer from Minneapolis Police to give evidence at the trial and was asked about the use of force on Mr Floyd's neck.
Sir, is this an MPD-trained neck restraint?
No, sir.
Has it ever been?
Not to my neck restraint, no, sir.
Is this a MPD authorized restraint technique?
Knee on the neck would be something that does happen in use of force that isn't unauthorized.
And so if there was, say for example, the subject was under control and handcuffed, would this be authorized?
I would say no.
Well, you can see continuous coverage on Sky News, streaming live on our website and app and on YouTube, and also a special pop-up channel which is on Sky 524. 1 in 3 people who contract coronavirus will go on to develop a psychiatric or neurological condition within 6 months of being infected. Researchers at the University of Oxford analysed the medical records of more than 236,000 patients, mostly from the United States, in the largest study of its kind. The study reveals anxiety is the most common condition amongst COVID sufferers.
I think it tells us that we need services across the whole of healthcare, from mental health through to neurology and respiratory medicine and so on, because the consequence of COVID can be so diverse. Different people will present with different combinations of difficulties. So really across the board, we need to try and make sure that services are organised and resourced in a way that will allow people to get effective treatment as quickly as possible. And in the end, that's in all our interests if we can all get people back and healthy and functioning again.
Brazil's COVID crisis has been likened to a biological Fukushima after more than 4,000 deaths were recorded in a single day. A Brazilian doctor compared the virus to a nuclear reactor, setting off a chain reaction and going out of control. The country's total number of COVID deaths now stands at 337,000, second only to the United States. Now, friends of the imprisoned Russian dissident Alexei Navalny say his health is deteriorating quickly. Mr. Navalny is on a hunger strike, demanding better medical attention. The authorities insist he's being well treated. Well, our Russia correspondent Diana Magne reports from the prison where he's being held, east of Moscow.
Stay back, he's saying. Inside those prison walls is Alexei Navalny, on hunger strike for almost a week because he says he's not getting the medical care he needs for serious back and leg pain. Now with a fever and bad cough too, and according to one Russian newspaper, he's been moved to the prison hospital. Do you think that it is the Kremlin behind the fact that he's not getting the medical attention he needs?
Absolutely. Я думаю, что Путин не успокоится, пока не сделает из Алексея инвалида, потому что мелкий, отвратительный чекист завидует молодому, высокому, прекрасному мужчине.
More media than protesters. Press filming police, filming press. Anastasia Vasileva, who's head of the Alliance of Doctors, tweeted that she was on her way, met not by a mob of police, but by a mob of journalists. She's a close associate of Alexei Navalny, just out of house arrest herself for calling for rallies during the pandemic. What have they said to you?
The policemen, they said that I have no possibility now to visit the chief of this prison. I don't know why, but I should not visit a medical worker because they don't allow. I don't know why. I think that we will wait.
Waiting, though, turned out not to be the best call. She and 6 others were detained, including a couple of journalists. Last week, these CCTV pictures of Navalny pacing his cell were leaked to state media. The narrative there that his medical complaints don't add up.
Maria Butina, an expert for Russia's Commission.
Maria Butina, who was jailed in the US in 2018 for being a foreign agent, was the star attraction on state broadcaster RT. Her contention, predictably, that Navalny was fine and that jail in the US was worse. The Kremlin says any prisoner who's ill will get the appropriate treatment. But Navalny isn't any old prisoner.
Навальный — это идея. Это идея того, что Россия может быть богатой, успешной, развивающейся страной. Страной, в которой мы хотим жить.
Lofty dreams invested in one man, behind bars for the foreseeable. His health in question, his supporters helpless to do much about it. Diana Magne, Sky News, Pokrov, Russia.
Now, how about this for a bit of drama at a beauty pageant?
There's a rule that you all have to be married and not divorced.
Well, the winner in the Miss Sri Lanka contest had the crown snatched from her head on stage over claims she was divorced. Pushpika de Silva walked off the stage in Colombo in tears, but reports now say she's been reinstated as the winner. Oh dear. Dear. I don't know quite how to follow that, to be honest. If Naz had a crown on, let me tell you, I would not dare rip it from her head.
Whether I've been divorced or not.
You better have it.
Well, lots of sunshine for this morning. Sunny spells this afternoon as well, but it's still staying cold, although feeling less cold as the winds will be lighter.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. It's looking fine over the next few days. Still cold though, but not as cold as recent days because the winds will be lighter. And the winds actually briefly changing direction into Thursday, so it will be a bit of a milder story too. But only briefly, the rest of the week looks generally cold. So a chilly start out there this morning. Temperatures are below freezing in some central areas, of widespread frost. There's also the risk of ice. And we have got wintry showers across northern Scotland and western and eastern coast. In fact, it's rather windy around eastern coastal areas with gales there. But the winds should tend to ease. The wintry showers are becoming confined to northern parts of Scotland this afternoon. And we continue with largely fine conditions through today with bright or sunny spells, although there will be a gradual build-up of clouds. So there won't be wall-to-wall sunshine like there is across many areas this morning. And as I said, there will still be some wintry showers across northern Scotland, perhaps a few around some coastal areas. Winds becoming lighter around the east coast, though. And with the lighter winds, it won't feel as cold, but temperatures still in single figures for many areas. Later, then, we'll also see rain spreading to parts of the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland, perhaps the far southwest of Scotland, spreading eastwards through the night.
Now, the government has again this morning emphasised the safety of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine after a trial on children was paused while the regulator investigates a possible link to rare blood clots. The Minister for Small Business, Paul Scully, said that people should continue to come forward to get the jab.
There are clearly, what I'm saying is that there's no causal links between blood clots and AstraZeneca that have been proven as yet. So that's why it's right that the scientists do their work. But clearly, as you've heard from Callum Semple just a short time ago, that it is the best thing to do in order to keep all of us well, all of us safe, is to have the vaccination when it's determined to do so. The regulators would not regulate a drug that is proven to be unsafe.
Let's have a look at the latest figures for you. In 2,379 new COVID cases have been reported, with 20 more deaths across the UK. Now, that takes the total number of people who've died to 126,882. In terms of the vaccine, 31.62 million first doses have now been given. Well, let's talk to Professor of Clinical Microbiology at the Cambridge Institute for Therapeutic Immunology and Infectious Diseases, Ravi Gupta. Good to see you this morning. Look, in terms of AstraZeneca and the fact that this trial on children aged 16 to 18 has now been halted, how concerned should we be?
Well, I think that it was absolutely the right decision to halt the study in children pending further investigation of the perceived increased risk of blood clots in adults. So I think that it's not anything to worry about, but it's important to have the information in front of us before we proceed with studies in individuals who are less likely to benefit from vaccination directly.
I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? That it causes concern, understandably so. But the risk here, from what we know so far, would seem to be in the younger end of the population and not those people who are most at risk from developing very severe COVID symptoms.
That's right. So the increased risk of blood clots was also seen in adults below 55. But we also need to remember that people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s are also at risk of severe COVID-19. We've seen that with the new variants, that there are anecdotal suggestions that that younger people are developing severe and life-threatening disease. So there is an argument for the vaccination to continue in those individuals because the rate of this blood clot disorder is extremely low, although slightly elevated above background levels. So there's a case to be made for older adults, but for children, of course, the reason for vaccinating them is to actually cut down transmission in the community in the main. And therefore, I think that halting studies in children is not going to have a serious impact at population level, but it's just good practice to do this.
So are you saying you would have no concerns for any adult, I mean, at 18 or over, I guess, and actually taking this vaccine when they're eventually called forward?
I think that on balance at the moment, there's still transmission of SARS-CoV-2, and there is a risk to all of us of being infected, particularly as the economy is being opened up and society is opening up. We are at risk of getting severe infection, all of us. So I would certainly be going forward for that vaccine in the current situation, because I'm in that age group. So yes, I think it should be continued.
How much sort of easing on the system does the Moderna vaccine add now? I mean, it's going to cover 8.5 million people. It's 17 million doses that we've ordered. I mean, how much better is it to have multiple vaccines like this on stream in the UK?
It is always good to have a range of different vaccines because, as we are seeing, there may be unforeseen peculiarities of certain vaccines that aren't evident in the initial trials that are done. So post-trial surveillance that we're doing now, looking at rare side effects, is something that happens for all medicines, and therefore having a range of different medicines is important. Because each one will have certain issues with it. There is no perfect vaccine. There is no perfect drug, and I think the government made a very good decision early on to spread the risk across different vaccines and also to spread the benefits across different vaccines. And so I think the Moderna vaccine, the Moderna vaccine will be really welcome as an addition.
Oh, Professor Gupta, good to talk to you. Thank you. Now, Joe Pike is back with us this morning because you've been looking into this, what's a very strange situation with the Unite Union and some huge amounts of money they've been spending.
Yes, indeed. In Birmingham, on a big hotel, conference centre and union office project. And Unite the Union are very significant because they are Labour's biggest donor. You might not think trade unions are as significant as they were in the 70s or 80s. Less industrial action, of course, but there are still many millions of people, some suggest 6 million people, who are members of trade unions. That makes those organisations pretty wealthy, and the people who run them, Stephen, pretty influential.
He is a power broker, a kingmaker. Len McCluskey helped Ed Miliband become Labour leader and Jeremy Corbyn hold on to the job. But after 10 years running Unite the Union, his power seems to be waning. His chosen candidate, Rebecca Long-Bailey, failed in her bid to lead Labour. McCluskey himself is due to stand down in the next 12 months. And now he faces accusations of cronyism over the union's development of a new hotel, conference centre and union base in Birmingham, and its construction contract awarded to a company owned by a friend. The now almost completed building may be in Birmingham, but the foundations of this story are on Merseyside. Len McCluskey was born here. He worked on the docks and joined the union, but it's also where he made links that would last a lifetime. The man on the left is Paul Flanagan. He runs Liverpool-based building company Flanagan's. McCluskey described the firm as a working-class family who've made good and never forgotten their roots. Flanagan's was given the big contract to build the hotel. Overseeing health and safety on the project, a different company owned by David Anderson, the son of former Liverpool Mayor Joe Anderson. All three men have been arrested on suspicion of bribery as part of a corruption investigation not linked to Unite. They all deny wrongdoing and have been released under investigation. There is no suggestion of any criminal wrongdoing in the union's dealings with either company. But there are now growing calls within Labour for an investigation into Unite.
The obvious answer to a lack of transparency is to have an independent inquiry, and I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. I think that's what the members would expect.
I feel angry. I feel this is an outrageous abuse of positions to use members' hard-earned subs to fund a project that's gone catastrophically wrong, and there's been no apologies.
The development was originally supposed to cost around £7 million. Before work began in 2017, the union estimated the bill would be £57 million. But by January this year, the total cost was just over £98 million.
The big question for Unite and its members, was this building worth it? It was supposed to save the union money on hotel bills and conference costs, but now it seems like the millions spent here could take years, even decades, to make back.
The lack of transparency, huge overspend, concerns about tendering, and the fact Len McCluskey is Unite's only paid elected official meant we wanted to speak to him.
We're from Sky News, we're trying to find Mr McCluskey.
The union ignored our request, so we went to their London headquarters to try and find him.
Is it possible to speak to him?
He's not in the building.
Before eventually getting through by phone. We just wanted to speak to you, if it's possible, about your Birmingham hotel and... He told us to call the press office, and they said Mr McCluskey did not want to do an interview.
Let's put the phone down.
When we asked Unite, they told us their initial estimate for the project was too low, but the costs increased over time. Money was also spent adding an extra floor to the building and turning it from a 3 to a 4-star hotel. They reject a lack of openness in the tendering process, saying Len McCluskey wasn't involved, but they will not name other companies who applied for the contract. This building will be Len McCluskey's legacy. The race to succeed him officially begins within weeks. Joe Pike, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, let's talk to the Shadow Defence Secretary, John Healey, who joins us now. And lots to talk to you about this morning, but can we start off with this Unite situation? Are you comfortable with what's gone on?
Really isn't for me or any other Labour MP. This is an independent trade union. It's accountable to its members. That's where the principal answers need to be sought. And of course, there's a legal system of investigation and certification through something called the certification officer. So there are ways of making sure
Forgive me, but how is this not the concern of any Labour MP? Because many Labour MPs are members of Unite. Unite is the biggest donor to the Labour Party, and indeed Unite funds some parliamentary campaigns for some MPs when they're standing in an election. Surely this is the concern of the Labour Party.
No, this is properly a matter for Unite to answer, and the General Secretary to answer to the members and any other challenge through the certification officer. My concern, and I work very closely with Unite, my concern is for the Unite members in the defence and aerospace industry around this country that have seen 30,000 defence jobs go over the last decade through a combination of government cuts and a failed policy of global competition, which means we've seen contracts placed overseas instead of building up the British manufacturing and technological base in this country, and that's the sort of action and involvement I want to see, and that's where I want to see Unite most active.
Are you a member of Unite, Mr. Healey?
No, I'm not.
But you talk about the members who you are dealing with in the defence sector. Are you not concerned about the £100 million of their money that's been spent on a project that was either meant to cost £7 million, ended up being best part of £100 million, and there seems to have been a total lack of transparency into how this bid was tendered out?
No, look, I'm not a Unite member. I work very closely with Unite and other trade unions. I'm a Labour Party shadow cabinet member. We're the party of working people and trade unions. My concern, my principal concern, is for the £8 billion of government investment in defence that's been stripped out over the last decade. And my concern today is to make sure that ministers don't make the same mistakes over the next decade. And we need instead a proper built-in Britain plan, not a competition by default plan. We need an annual report to Parliament so that we can see the proportion of taxpayers' money from Britain that is going into British jobs and British companies. And we need to see a national plan to support the development of some first-rate small and medium-sized companies so that when we come to commission what we need for our national security and our military in 10 years' time, we're in a position to build it in Britain instead of having to buy off the shelf from overseas.
Yeah, forgive me. I mean, the Labour Party is very keen, and perhaps rightly so, to point out claims of cronyism against the Tory Party when these are things that are alleged. Is the Labour Party not tainted by your biggest donor by miles facing accusations of cronyism?
My point to you is quite simply, these are properly questions for Unite and the Unite leadership to answer to their members and publicly, and to any challenge through the certification officer. There is a framework in place for dealing with these things.
So,
my concern as Shadow Defence Secretary is different. Mine's an industrial, not a political interest, and that's where I do most of my work with the Unite Union, which
Would you support an inquiry, as Ben Bradshaw mentioned?
That's not a matter of it for me, and other Labour MPs have their own views. My concern is for the government's defence policy, investment in our manufacturing base in this country, and as far as Unite goes, for those many thousands of Unite members that are producing some of the vital defence and security equipment that we need to keep us all safe.
But in terms of that defence equipment, I know you're pushing for this, a commitment to get British, to build British, in terms of all that level of procurement. What if that doesn't prove to be the best value for money?
Well, there's always a question of value for money, but we've got to we believe that when it's done well, and it's not been done well enough over the decade, that investment in Britain's defence industry in this country reinforces our economy. And COVID tells us the risk of relying on long international supply chains means that when it's done well, it can also reinforce our security and our sovereignty. That should be the priority for the period ahead.
But in terms of how things are tendered out and how we work in a market economy, if there is a guarantee of buying British, that removes some of that market competition, doesn't it?
I'm proposing today a higher bar for any contracts that are put overseas, and there will always be cases where it makes sense to develop new strategic systems with allies, or in some cases to buy from overseas. We need a higher bar and a presumption that we will look to buy British first. We've not had that over the last 10 years. We need it now, not just for our economy and our jobs right across the UK, but for our greater national independence in future and our security as well.
What commitment can you give as the Shadow Defence Secretary to the men and women serving in our armed forces should you come to power?
I can give the commitment that, as we've done as a Labour government in the past, and you'll hear Keir Starmer and I both say this, we both served in government, the first duty of any government is the defence of the country, the support of our armed forces and the safety of our citizens. And we take that responsibility just as seriously in opposition.
John Healey, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that if we all work together, we can really make a difference to the air pollution around our schools?
Yeah, we should really do that.
Most places will be fine and dry this afternoon with some sunny spells, but it'll gradually become cloudier through the day. Wintry showers over the northwest will ease, but later outbreaks of rain will spread across Northern Ireland, the northwest of the Republic and perhaps far western fringes of Scotland. It'll be a cold day everywhere again, but not as cold as previous days. So taking a look at the air pollution levels on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very high, most places will remain at a low level of 1 to 3 again. However, some isolated moderate levels of 4 to 6 may persist in the Shetland and Orkney Isles, as well as the far north coast of Scotland.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Now, if you suffer from chronic pain, you'd know just how awful it actually is. And people who have that chronic pain with no known cause should not be prescribed painkillers. That's according to the Medicines Watchdog, at least, which has today set out new guidelines recommending they should instead be offered a range of therapies, including exercise, acupuncture and antidepressants. Now, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence says that pain which lasts for more than 3 months is known as chronic or persistent pain. It's sometimes caused by an underlying condition like osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis or endometriosis, and that's known as a chronic secondary pain. Now, where the cause of the pain is unclear, it's called chronic primary pain, and that's what this new guidance focuses on.
For a long time, the expectation that there was a pill for every ill was one that lots of us had, and we thought that when we had pain, the medicines that we thought of as painkillers could adequately control that. What we know from new evidence and what's absolutely backed up in these new guidelines is that that's not the case, and that actually these medicines, when taken for a long period of time, actually don't work particularly well and cause a significant number of side effects themselves. It's very important that the public understands that the risk-benefit has shifted, and now actually the risk of taking these medicines and their side effects is higher, and the benefit of taking them is less than we'd previously anticipated.
Well, let's talk to Hazel Taylor, a senior nurse and clinical director at Washington Primary Care Network. Good to see you this morning. Look, I'm just trying to put myself in the position of someone at home watching right now who suffers from chronic pain with no known cause, who are going to turn around and say, I don't want acupuncture. I don't want to be prescribed exercise. I want a pill that's going to make life a bit more bearable.
Yes, I mean, you can understand patients have been on these medicines for a long time and they're going to be anxious. And I think it's our jobs as doctors and nurses and people in primary care to explain all the alternative good treatments that there are now for people, a lot better than there have been in the past. I think we've relied totally on painkillers as the fix for all these ails, and now we need to help people understand that there's so many other things without the side effects that come along with painkiller management. The painkillers will only last for a certain length of time, then they stop work, and then people find themselves taking stronger and stronger medication. So I think it's our job to try and use the education of other medicines, of other therapeutics, physiotherapy, exercises, cognitive behavioural therapy, things that can really help people's mind and help them focus on improving the pain without the side effects and long-term ill effects of painkillers.
But how comparable are the effects of some of these cognitive behavioural therapy or acupuncture? How does that compare to the effects of taking something like an opioid, a tramadol, or a cocodamol or something like that?
I think this is how we have to shift our mindset, I think, because we're so used to using those. And quite often there is a place, maybe it's in early acute pain, and then people often then end up taking these painkillers for much, much longer than they should be on them. And I think that's where the problem lies, that nobody has then re-educated saying, right, now it's time maybe we reduce those tablets and look at some of the alternative therapies, and they are very beneficial. There's been lots of studies to show that if you can slowly educate people to change down from medication, and we wouldn't suddenly stop medication. That's not the aim of this. It's not suddenly to say, right, we're going to take that away from you and give you this. It's a communication with the patient saying, these are some of the therapies that are out there. These are things that we can try. Should we try and reduce your medication slowly? And there's different therapies for different patients. Like everything, patients are individual. So you would have to decide, well, this might suit you in negotiation with the patient. So it's getting them on board, I think, to understand the other therapies that we can use.
What if it doesn't work?
Well, we've always got, we would never say, no, you can't have anything. That's not the game. And if people are in acute pain and need to increase painkillers, then I think that's always there. There's there's a place for everything, but there's a lot of people on these who don't need to be on them. So there is still people that might need to be on painkillers. That's what they're there for. But there's also a lot of people on them that can easily change and use alternatives that have never been actually offered these alternatives, so they don't even know they exist. And there's lots of side effects with painkiller management that people, if they start reducing off them, suddenly feel better. They feel better in themselves. They're not tired. They're not fatigued. These can increase weight. All sorts of problems with taking long-term analgesics that people don't often understand or know. So I think we need to give people the opportunity.
Is there perhaps a misunderstanding in a way that we think if we have a chronic pain, that there is going to be something out there that can remove that pain altogether? Do we have to have an acceptance that we're going to have to put up with some level of pain or discomfort?
Yes, I think so. I think there is the myth that, you know, we're going to be completely pain-free. And even analgesics are not completely pain-free, because often we find with patients, we then start to increase the analgesic because that level isn't working. And then they'll go back again and we increase them again. And I think there's about an understanding with the patient that some level of pain, as long as you can live with it and maybe do exercises and mindfulness and things that help with that pain, you can still get by and live day to day and live quite well, but you might not get rid of every bit of pain that you've got, especially with things like arthritis, you know, where you're going to have discomfort, and some days are going to be better than others. But if you're on strong analgesics all the time for these things, so it's trying to manage the pain better and have a better understanding over the long-term consequences of it.
Okay, look, Hazel Taylor, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Very much.
OK, let's get a check on the weather for you with Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. The following few days will feel less cold because it's going to be less windy. And in fact, we see a change in wind direction briefly on Thursday with a milder airflow, but then we go back to more cold airflow into the weekend. So let's take a look at this morning. It's a chilly start. It's sunny, though. For many areas, it's mainly dry as well, except across northern areas of Scotland. There are wintry showers there around western and eastern coasts as well. In fact, around North Sea facing coast, very strong winds that will tend to ease later. We'll see bright or sunny spells this afternoon, a build-up of cloud, though, through this afternoon. Then rain later over the north of Ireland, Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland.